Hey warrior, you wake up Monday morning and your alarm screams at you. Your bed feels like a warm hug you never want to leave. Your mind whispers, 5 more minutes won't hurt. But across town, someone else hears that same alarm and springs into action. They meditate, exercise, and tackle their biggest challenge before most people even open their eyes. What separates these two people? It's not talent, luck, or some magical superpower. It's discipline. Here's the brutal truth. We live in a world that's designed to make us weak. Everything around us promises instant gratification. Social media gives us dopamine hits every few seconds. Food delivery apps satisfy our cravings in 30 minutes. Streaming services eliminate the need to wait for our favorite shows. We've become addicted to easy, but easy never built character, and it certainly never built greatness. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, could have indulged in any pleasure imaginable. Instead, he chose discipline. He wrote in his personal journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This wasn't just philosophy for him, it was survival. Leading an empire required mental toughness that could only come from disciplined thinking. The Stoics understood something we've forgotten in our modern world. Discipline isn't about punishment or deprivation, it's about freedom. When you master yourself, you become unshakable. When you control your impulses, you control your destiny. When you discipline your mind, you unlock possibilities that weak people will never see. But here's what nobody tells you about discipline. It's not about becoming a robot or suppressing your humanity. Real discipline, the kind that transforms lives, comes from understanding your deepest desires and aligning your actions with them. It's about becoming so clear on what you want that saying no to distractions becomes natural, almost automatic. Think about the last time you felt truly proud of yourself. I guarantee it wasn't when you took the easy path. It was when you pushed through resistance, when you did what needed to be done despite not feeling like it, when you chose growth over comfort. That feeling, that's the reward of discipline, and it's more satisfying than any instant pleasure. The ancient Stoics developed a system for building this kind of unbreakable discipline. They didn't just talk about it, they lived it. They faced wars, political upheaval, personal tragedies, and still maintained their principles. They created practical laws that anyone can follow, regardless of their circumstances. Epictetus, who went from slave to one of history's most respected philosophers, taught that no one can hurt you without your permission. This isn't just about emotional resilience. It's about disciplined thinking. When you control your mental responses, you control your entire experience of life. Today, I'm going to share with you 10 Stoic laws that will hack your mind and force you to become more disciplined. These aren't feel-good platitudes or motivational fluff. These are battle-tested principles that have helped ordinary people achieve extraordinary results for over 2,000 years. But I need you to understand something crucial. Knowledge without action is worthless. You can watch every self-improvement video on the internet, but if you don't apply what you learn, nothing changes. These Stoic laws require practice, patience, and most importantly, the willingness to be uncomfortable. Your future self is counting on the decisions you make today. Every moment you choose discipline over impulse, you're building the person you're meant to become. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you're betraying that future version of yourself. Before we dive into these transformative laws, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose discipline over comfort, and I am becoming unstoppable. Like this video if you're tired of being stuck. Comment below to affirm the discipline you're about to embrace. Share this with someone else who needs to toughen up. And most of all, subscribe to the channel and don't miss a second of what's coming. Number 1. The law of morning conquest. Seneca once said, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Your morning is that new beginning, and how you start determines how you finish. The first Stoic law of discipline is simple yet profound. Conquer your morning and you conquer your day. Most people wake up and immediately check their phones. They flood their minds with other people's problems, opinions and distractions before they've even had a chance to think their own thoughts. This is the opposite of discipline. It's mental surrender disguised as staying connected. The Stoics understood that the morning hours are sacred. Marcus Aurelius didn't start his day by reading reports from distant provinces. He started by examining his own thoughts and intentions. He prepared his mind for the challenges ahead. He reminded himself of his values and commitments. Your morning routine is your daily declaration of war against mediocrity. When you wake up and immediately do something difficult, whether it's exercise, meditation, or tackling your most important task, you're training your brain to choose discomfort over ease. You're building what psychologists call willpower muscle. But here's the key. Your morning routine must be personally meaningful. If you're just copying someone else's routine because it worked for them, you're missing the point. The Stoics were big on personal responsibility and self-knowledge. What works for a CEO might not work for a student. What works for someone without kids might not work for a parent. The real power of morning conquest isn't in the specific activities you do. It's in the act of keeping promises to yourself. When you say you'll wake up at 5 a.m. and you actually do it, you're building trust with yourself. When you commit to reading for 20 minutes and follow through, you're proving to your subconscious that you're someone who honors commitments. Think about the most disciplined people you know. I guarantee they have morning routines that they rarely break. They've learned that discipline is like a muscle. It gets stronger with use and weaker with neglect. By starting each day with intentional actions, they're strengthening their discipline muscle when it's at its peak. The morning is also when your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and impulse control, is at its strongest. As the day progresses and you make decision after decision, this mental muscle gets tired. This is why it's easier to eat healthy at breakfast than at 9 p.m. when you're emotionally drained. But morning conquest isn't just about productivity or achievement, it's about identity. When you consistently wake up early and do hard things, you start to see yourself as someone who does hard things. When you begin each day with intention, you start to see yourself as intentional. Your actions shape your identity, and your identity shapes your actions. The Stoics believed that we become what we repeatedly do. If you repeatedly choose the easy path in the morning, you become someone who chooses easy paths. If you repeatedly choose discipline in the morning, you become someone who chooses discipline throughout the day. Your morning routine doesn't have to be elaborate or time-consuming. It just needs to be consistent and challenging enough to require some effort. Maybe it's making your bed immediately upon waking. Maybe it's doing 10 push-ups. Maybe it's writing 3 things you're grateful for. The specific action matters less than the consistency and intention behind it. Remember, the goal isn't perfection. The goal is progress. Some mornings will be harder than others. Some days you'll fail. The disciplined response isn't self-criticism. It's getting back on track the next day. The Stoics understood that setbacks are part of the journey, not proof that you're not cut out for discipline. Number 2. The law of emotional ownership. Epictetus, who knew suffering intimately as a former slave, taught us one of the most liberating truths ever spoken. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. This is the second Stoic law of discipline. You must own your emotional responses completely. Most people live their entire lives as emotional slaves. Someone cuts them off in traffic, and their whole day is ruined. A colleague makes a snide comment, and they can't focus for hours. A text message doesn't get replied to quickly enough, and they spiral into anxiety. This isn't living, it's reacting. The undisciplined mind believes that emotions just happen to us, like weather. I can't help feeling angry, they say. This situation is making me stressed. But the Stoics knew better. They understood that between every stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies your power to choose. Think about the last time someone really triggered you. Maybe they criticized your work, or forgot something important, or said something hurtful. In that moment, you probably felt like your emotional response was automatic, unavoidable. But here's what really happened. Your brain interpreted the situation, assigned meaning to it, and then generated an emotion based on that interpretation. The key word here is interpretation. Two people can experience the exact same event and have completely different emotional responses. One person gets fired and sees it as a catastrophe. Another person gets fired and sees it as an opportunity for something better. The event is identical. The interpretation is different. This is where discipline becomes crucial. Emotional discipline isn't about suppressing feelings or pretending everything is fine. It's about taking responsibility for your interpretations. It's about asking yourself, is this thought serving me? Is this emotional response helping me move forward? What would the most disciplined version of myself do right now? Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. As emperor, he faced betrayals, military defeats, and personal losses. Yet he trained himself to find the opportunity in every obstacle. He wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." The practical application of this law starts with awareness. Begin noticing the gap between what happens and how you feel. When you feel anger rising, pause and ask, what story am I telling myself about this situation? When anxiety creeps in, examine, what assumptions am I making about the future? This isn't about becoming emotionally numb. Emotions are important signals that help us navigate life, but they should be information, not instructions. You can acknowledge that you feel frustrated without letting frustration control your actions. You can recognize sadness without letting it dictate your entire day. The Stoics had a powerful exercise for this. They would imagine losing everything they cared about, not to be morbid, but to practice emotional resilience. They understood that attachment to outcomes beyond our control creates suffering. When you stop needing specific outcomes to be happy, you become unshakable. But here's the beautiful part about emotional ownership. When you stop being a victim of your emotions, you discover emotional freedom. You realize that your peace of mind isn't dependent on other people's behavior, market conditions, or perfect circumstances. Your inner state becomes your sanctuary. This law requires daily practice. Start small. The next time someone does something that normally irritates you, pause before reacting. Take 3 deep breaths. Ask yourself what the most disciplined response would be. You might be surprised by how much power you actually have over your emotional world. Remember, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control what happens in you. That's not just philosophy, that's practical wisdom that can transform your entire experience of life. Let this be your reminder. Drop it below. I own my emotions, and I choose my responses. Number 3, the law of present moment mastery. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." This simple statement contains the 3rd Stoic law of discipline. Mastering the present moment is the key to mastering your entire life. Most people live everywhere except the present. They're replaying yesterday's mistakes or rehearsing tomorrow's worries. They're scrolling through social media, comparing their behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. They're physically here, but mentally scattered across time and space. This fractured attention is the enemy of discipline. The undisciplined mind is like a browser with 50 tabs open. It's constantly switching between thoughts, memories, plans, and distractions. Nothing gets full attention, so nothing gets done well. This isn't just inefficient, it's exhausting. Your brain burns through energy, jumping from thought to thought, leaving you feeling drained without having accomplished anything meaningful. The Stoics understood that the present moment is the only place where life actually happens. The past is gone and can't be changed. The future is uncertain and largely beyond our control. But right now, this moment, is where your power lives. This is where decisions are made, actions are taken, and life is actually lived. Think about the times when you felt most alive, most engaged, most fulfilled. I guarantee you were fully present in those moments. Maybe you were having a deep conversation with someone you love. Maybe you were completely absorbed in a creative project. Maybe you were pushing your physical limits during exercise. In those moments, there was no past or future, only the richness of now. This is what psychologists call flow state, but the Stoics discovered it 2,000 years ago. They called it prososche, continuous attention to the present moment. They knew that when you're fully present, you're operating at your highest level. Your thinking is clearer, your emotions are more balanced, and your actions are more effective. But present moment mastery isn't just about performance, it's about peace. When you're truly present, anxiety disappears. Anxiety only exists when your mind is projecting into an uncertain future. When you're fully here, regret fades away. Regret only exists when your mind is stuck in an unchangeable past. The practical challenge is that our modern world is designed to fracture our attention. Notifications ping constantly. News cycles demand our emotional investment in events we can't influence. Social media algorithms are specifically designed to capture and hold our attention. Fighting for present moment awareness is literally fighting against billion-dollar industries. But here's what the disciplined person knows. Your attention is your most valuable asset. Where you place your attention determines the quality of your experience. When you give your attention to the present moment, you're investing in the only moment that matters. The Stoics had a simple but powerful practice. They would regularly ask themselves, what is the most important thing I can do right now? Not in an hour, not tomorrow, but right now. This question cuts through mental noise and brings you back to what actually matters in this moment. Another Stoic technique is to fully engage with whatever you're doing. If you're eating, really taste your food. If you're walking, feel your feet touching the ground. If you're listening to someone, give them your complete attention. This isn't just mindfulness. It's a form of discipline that strengthens your ability to focus. When you master the present moment, you discover that life becomes richer, more vivid, more meaningful. You stop missing your own life while you're busy thinking about other things. You start to experience what the Stoics called ataraxia, unshakable tranquility that comes from being fully present to what is. The present moment is your training ground for discipline. Every time you notice your mind wandering and gently bring it back to now, you're doing a rep in the gym of consciousness. Every time you choose to focus on what's in front of you instead of what's on your phone, you're building the muscle of attention. Number 4, the law of obstacle transformation. Marcus Aurelius faced one of history's most brutal challenges. The Antonine Plague devastated his empire while barbarian tribes attacked from all sides. Yet he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is the fourth Stoic law of discipline. Every obstacle is an opportunity in disguise. Most people see obstacles as evidence that they're on the wrong path. They encounter resistance and immediately look for the exit. They face a setback and interpret it as a sign to quit. But the Stoics understood something revolutionary. Obstacles aren't roadblocks, they're training equipment. Think about how a muscle grows. It doesn't get stronger from comfort. It gets stronger from resistance, from being challenged, from being pushed beyond its current capacity. Your character works the same way. Every difficult situation is a chance to build mental muscle. Every problem is a chance to develop problem-solving skills. Every setback is a chance to practice resilience. The undisciplined mind sees obstacles as personal attacks from the universe. Why does this always happen to me? They ask. Why can't things just be easy? But the disciplined mind sees obstacles as curriculum. They ask, what is this situation trying to teach me? How can I use this challenge to become stronger? This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending that difficult situations don't hurt. Real problems cause real pain. Loss is loss. Failure is failure. The Stoics weren't denying reality. They were finding ways to extract value from every experience, even the painful ones. Epictetus taught that we don't get to choose what happens to us, but we get to choose what we do with what happens to us. He said, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. When you transform obstacles into opportunities, you're not just thinking differently, you're becoming different. The practical application starts with reframing. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, how is this happening for me? Instead of, this is terrible, try, this is training. Instead of, I can't handle this, say, this is teaching me how to handle harder things. But here's where it gets really powerful. When you consistently transform obstacles into opportunities, you start to lose your fear of obstacles. You begin to see challenges as chances to prove to yourself what you're capable of. You develop what the Stoics called amor fati, love of fate. You don't just accept what happens, you embrace it. Consider the entrepreneur who gets rejected by 50 investors before finding the one who believes in their vision. Each rejection wasn't a failure, it was preparation. It was teaching them to refine their pitch, strengthen their resolve, and clarify their vision. The obstacle of rejection became the way to eventual success. Think about the athlete who suffers a career-threatening injury. They could see it as the end of their dreams, or they could see it as a chance to develop mental toughness, to learn about different aspects of their sport, to come back stronger and more appreciative than before. The obstacle of injury becomes the way to deeper resilience. The key insight is this: the obstacle is not separate from the path. It is the path. Every challenge you face is specifically designed to develop the exact qualities you need for the next level of your life. The person who can handle your dreams is forged in the fire of your obstacles. This law requires a fundamental shift in perspective. Instead of trying to avoid difficulties, you start to see them as valuable training. Instead of seeing problems as proof that you're not meant for success, you see them as proof that you're being prepared for something bigger. The Stoics believed that the universe is rational and that everything happens for a reason. Whether you believe that or not, acting as if it's true changes everything. When you treat every obstacle as a teacher, you become an unstoppable student of life. Number 5. The law of voluntary discomfort. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, regularly practiced poverty. He would sleep on the floor, eat simple food, and wear rough clothes. He wasn't masochistic, he was preparing. He understood the fifth Stoic law of discipline. Voluntary discomfort builds involuntary strength. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding discomfort. They want the temperature to be perfect, the food to be delicious, the entertainment to be constant, and the work to be effortless. They've created lives of such softness that the smallest inconvenience feels like a crisis. This isn't living, it's hiding. The Stoics knew that comfort is the enemy of growth. When you only experience pleasant sensations, you become weak. When you only face easy challenges, you become fragile. When you only do what feels good, you become enslaved to your feelings. Voluntary discomfort is the antidote to this weakness. Think about this. Every skill you've ever developed required discomfort. Learning to read was uncomfortable. Your brain had to work hard to decode symbols into meaning. Learning to drive was uncomfortable. Your nervous system had to coordinate complex movements while processing multiple streams of information. Learning to handle difficult conversations was uncomfortable. You had to push through anxiety and awkwardness to develop social skills. The principle is simple. If you want to be comfortable with discomfort, you have to practice being uncomfortable. If you want to be strong when life gets hard, you have to make life hard on purpose. If you want to be disciplined when it matters, you have to practice discipline when it doesn't. Seneca called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. He would imagine losing his wealth, his health, his reputation, not to be negative, but to be prepared. He knew that if he practiced handling difficulties in his mind, he would be ready to handle them in reality. But voluntary discomfort isn't just mental, it's physical too. The Stoics understood that the body and mind are connected. When you strengthen your body's ability to handle discomfort, you strengthen your mind's ability to handle difficulty. This is why they practiced things like cold exposure, fasting, and physical challenges. Modern science confirms what the Stoics knew intuitively. Cold exposure increases norepinephrine, which improves focus and mood. Fasting increases neuroplasticity, which enhances learning and adaptation. Physical challenges build mental resilience through a process called cross-stressor adaptation. Handling one type of stress makes you better at handling other types of stress. The practical application is to regularly choose the harder path. Take cold showers. Walk instead of driving when possible. Do difficult workouts. Have uncomfortable conversations. Say no to things you want but don't need. Fast occasionally. Sleep on the floor sometimes. These aren't punishments, they're training. But here's the crucial distinction. Voluntary discomfort is not self-punishment, it's self-preparation. You're not trying to suffer, you're trying to become someone who can handle suffering. You're not trying to be miserable, you're trying to become someone who can find peace regardless of external circumstances. The beautiful paradox is that when you regularly choose discomfort, you become more comfortable. When you practice handling difficult situations become easier to handle. When you voluntarily give up pleasures, you become less dependent on pleasures for happiness. Epictetus taught that freedom comes from wanting what you have, not having what you want. Voluntary discomfort breaks the cycle of endless wanting. It shows you that you can be happy with less. It proves that your peace of mind doesn't depend on perfect conditions. This law builds what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to survive difficult emotions and situations without making them worse. When you can sit with discomfort without immediately trying to escape it, you develop a superpower that most people never discover. Start small. Choose one area where you can practice voluntary discomfort. Maybe it's waking up 15 minutes earlier. Maybe it's doing 10 push-ups when you don't feel like it. Maybe it's eating one meal a day that's just fuel, not pleasure. The specific practice matters less than the principle. Regularly choose the harder path. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I embrace discomfort and I am becoming unbreakable. Number 6. The Law of Death Reflection. Marcus Aurelius kept a human skull on his desk, not to be morbid, but to remember the most important truth. You could die today. Let this determine what you do and say and think. This is the 6th Stoic law of discipline. Remembering death gives life meaning and urgency. Most people live as if they have infinite time, They postpone important conversations, delay pursuing their dreams, and waste precious hours on meaningless activities. They act as if death is something that happens to other people, something far in the future, something they don't need to think about. This delusion is the enemy of discipline. The Stoics called this practice memento mori, remember death. They weren't being depressing or negative, they were being realistic. Death is the only certainty in life, yet we spend most of our time pretending it doesn't exist. This pretense makes us weak, unfocused, and undisciplined. Think about the last time you were reminded of your mortality. Maybe someone you knew passed away unexpectedly. Maybe you had a health scare. Maybe you witnessed an accident. In those moments, everything became clear. The petty arguments seemed foolish. The delayed dreams seemed urgent. The wasted time seemed tragic. Death has a way of cutting through the noise and showing us what actually matters. But here's what's fascinating. You don't have to wait for a crisis to access this clarity. You can use death reflection as a daily practice to prioritize what matters and eliminate what doesn't. When you remember that your time is limited, you become incredibly selective about how you spend it. Steve Jobs, who faced his own mortality with pancreatic cancer, said, "Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose." This isn't just inspirational, it's practical wisdom. When you truly understand that your time is finite, you stop wasting it on things that don't align with your deepest values. The undisciplined person avoids thinking about death because it makes them uncomfortable. But the disciplined person embraces death reflection because it makes them focused. They ask themselves, if I had only 6 months to live, how would I spend them? What would I stop doing? What would I start doing? Who would I tell I love them? What would I create? What would I contribute? This isn't about becoming obsessed with death. It's about becoming obsessed with life. When you remember that every day is a gift, you stop taking days for granted. When you remember that every conversation might be your last with someone, you show up more fully. When you remember that your time is limited, you become more intentional about how you use it. The Stoics understood that death anxiety is actually life anxiety. We're not really afraid of dying. We're afraid of not having truly lived. We're afraid of reaching the end and realizing we wasted our precious time on things that didn't matter. Death reflection cures this anxiety by forcing us to live deliberately. Seneca wrote, "Let us examine ourselves and rid ourselves of the faults we have acquired." He practiced nightly reflection, asking himself how he had spent his day and whether he had lived up to his values. This wasn't self-criticism, it was self-correction. He knew that time was his most valuable resource, and he wanted to invest it wisely. The practical application is simple but profound. Start each day by remembering that this might be your last, not to create anxiety, but to create urgency around what matters. End each day by asking yourself, if I died tonight, would I be proud of how I spent today? Did I love well? Did I contribute something valuable? Did I waste time on things that don't matter? This practice transforms how you approach everything. You become less willing to engage in petty conflicts because you realize how precious your energy is. You become more willing to take risks because you understand that the biggest risk is not taking any risks at all. You become more disciplined because you realize that discipline is how you honor the gift of life. Death reflection isn't about being morbid, it's about being alive. It's about living each day as if it matters, because it does. It's about making choices that your dying self would be proud of, because one day you will be that dying self. Number 7, the law of negative visualization. Epictetus taught his students a powerful exercise. When you kiss your child goodnight, whisper to yourself, "Tomorrow you may be dead." This is not a curse, but a practice to help you appreciate what you have. This is the seventh Stoic law of discipline. Negative visualization builds gratitude and resilience. Most people think that imagining bad things happening will make them happen or make them miserable. But the Stoics discovered the opposite. When you mentally rehearse loss, you become more grateful for what you have and more prepared for what might come. This practice, called premeditatio malorum, is one of the most powerful tools for building emotional strength. Think about how your brain works. You worry about losing your job, your health, your relationships, but you do this worrying ineffectively. You catastrophize without preparing. You imagine the worst-case scenario without developing a plan to handle it. This creates anxiety without benefit. Negative visualization is structured, purposeful, and incredibly practical. The undisciplined mind either avoids thinking about potential problems or obsesses over them destructively. The disciplined mind uses negative visualization as a tool for appreciation and preparation. They don't just imagine what could go wrong, they imagine how they would handle it if it did go wrong. Here's how it works. Once a week, spend 10 minutes imagining losing something you value. Maybe it's your job, your health, your home, or someone you love. Don't just think about the loss, think about how you would respond. What would you do next? How would you rebuild? What strengths would you draw upon? What would you learn from the experience? This practice does two incredible things. First, it makes you appreciate what you currently have. When you imagine losing your ability to walk, you become grateful for every step. When you imagine losing your sight, you become grateful for every sunset. When you imagine losing someone you love, you become grateful for every moment with them. Second, it builds mental resilience. When you've mentally rehearsed difficult scenarios, you're less likely to be overwhelmed if they actually happen. You've already done the emotional work of processing the loss. You've already developed a plan for moving forward. You've already connected with the inner strength you would need. Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps, wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." This is what negative visualization teaches you, that no matter what happens externally, you have the power to choose your response internally. The Stoics weren't pessimists, they were realists who chose to be prepared. They understood that suffering comes not from what happens to us, but from the gap between what we expect and what actually occurs. When you regularly practice negative visualization, you reduce this gap. You become less attached to specific outcomes and more confident in your ability to handle whatever comes. But here's the key. Negative visualization must be balanced with positive action. You don't just imagine problems, you also imagine solutions. You don't just rehearse loss, you also rehearse resilience. You don't just practice being disappointed, you also practice being adaptable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." He understood that everything in life is temporary. Jobs end, relationships change, health challenges arise, money comes and goes. The only constant is your ability to adapt and respond. The practical application is to make this a regular practice. Once a week, choose something you value and spend a few minutes imagining its loss. But don't stop there. Imagine how you would rebuild, adapt, and find meaning in the new situation. This isn't about expecting the worst. It's about preparing for anything. This practice creates what psychologists call psychological immune system, the ability to bounce back from difficulties. When you've mentally rehearsed challenges, you develop confidence in your ability to handle them. You become anti-fragile, not just surviving difficulties, but growing stronger from them. Number 8. The law of identity transformation. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." This is the 8th Stoic law of discipline. You must become the person your goals require, not just chase the goals themselves. Most people approach discipline backwards. They focus on what they want to achieve instead of who they need to become. They want to lose weight, but don't become someone who values health. They want to build wealth, but don't become someone who makes wise financial decisions. They want better relationships, but don't become someone who consistently shows up for others. This is why most people fail at discipline. They're trying to act against their identity instead of transforming their identity. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. When you go to the gym, you're voting to be an athlete. When you write, you're voting to be a writer. When you meditate, you're voting to be someone who values inner peace. The Stoics understood that identity is not fixed. You're not born disciplined or undisciplined. You're not naturally organized or disorganized. You're not inherently successful or unsuccessful. These are all identities you can choose to adopt through consistent action. Think about the most disciplined person you know. They didn't wake up one day with superhuman willpower. They gradually became someone who values discipline through thousands of small decisions. They chose the harder path so many times that choosing the harder path became part of who they are. Here's the breakthrough insight. When your actions align with your identity, discipline becomes effortless. The person who sees themselves as an athlete doesn't struggle to exercise. Exercise is just what athletes do. The person who sees themselves as a reader doesn't struggle to read. Reading is just what readers do. The person who sees themselves as disciplined doesn't struggle with discipline. Discipline is just who they are. But identity transformation requires more than just deciding to be different. It requires what psychologists call identity-based evidence. You need proof that you are who you say you are. This proof comes from your actions, especially the small, consistent ones that nobody else sees. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and round it the seething waters are laid to rest." He became this kind of person through daily practice. Every morning, he reminded himself of his values. Every evening, he reflected on how well he had lived up to them. The practical application starts with a simple question. What kind of person do I want to become? Not what do you want to achieve, but who do you want to be? Do you want to be someone who is disciplined, creative, kind, courageous, healthy, wise? Write it down. Be specific. Then ask yourself, what would this person do in my current situation? If you want to be someone who is disciplined, what would a disciplined person do right now? If you want to be someone who is healthy, what would a healthy person eat for lunch? If you want to be someone who is successful, what would a successful person do with their evening? The key is to start small and be consistent. Don't try to transform your entire identity overnight. Choose one small action that your ideal self would do regularly and commit to doing it every day. Maybe it's making your bed. Maybe it's reading for 10 minutes. Maybe it's taking a daily walk. The specific action matters less than the consistency. Each time you follow through on this commitment, you're building evidence for your new identity. You're proving to yourself that you are becoming who you want to be. Over time, these small actions compound into massive identity shifts. The Stoics called this ascesis, spiritual exercise. They understood that becoming a better person requires practice, just like becoming a better athlete or musician. You don't just decide to be disciplined, you practice discipline until discipline becomes part of who you are. But here's what's beautiful about identity transformation. It's not about perfection, it's about direction. Every time you act in alignment with your ideal self, you're moving closer to that identity. Every time you make a choice that your future self would be proud of, you're becoming your future self. Number 9, the law of systems over goals. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." He understood the 9th Stoic law of discipline. Sustainable change comes from building systems, not chasing goals. Most people are addicted to goal setting. They write down what they want to achieve, create detailed plans, and then wonder why they lose motivation after a few weeks. They focus on the destination instead of the journey, the outcome instead of the process, the finish line instead of the daily steps. The problem with goals is that they're temporary. You either achieve them and then feel empty, or you fail to achieve them and feel defeated. Either way, you end up back where you started. Goals are like trying to clean a messy room by hiding everything in the closet. It looks better temporarily, but the underlying system that created the mess is still there. The Stoics understood that lasting change comes from changing your daily systems, not your annual goals. A system is a collection of habits, routines, and processes that automatically produce results. When you focus on building better systems, better outcomes become inevitable. Think about it this way. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. If you want to lose weight, don't focus on losing 20 pounds. Focus on building a system that includes daily movement, healthy meal preparation, and consistent sleep. If you want to write a book, don't focus on having a published book. Focus on building a system that includes daily writing, regular editing, and consistent learning about your craft. The beautiful thing about systems is that they work whether you feel motivated or not. Motivation is like the weather. It changes constantly and you can't control it. But systems are like your house. They protect you regardless of what's happening outside. When you have a strong system, you make progress even on days when you don't feel like it. Marcus Aurelius had a system for daily reflection. Every morning he would write in his journal about how he wanted to show up that day. Every evening he would review how well he had lived up to his values. This wasn't about achieving a specific goal. It was about becoming a better person through daily practice. The Stoics called this kaizen, continuous improvement. They understood that small, consistent improvements compound into massive results over time. A 1% improvement every day doesn't feel like much, but over a year, it makes you 37 times better. This is the power of systems thinking. Here's how to build a system that works. Start with your desired identity from the previous law and ask, what would someone with this identity do daily? If you want to be someone who is physically fit, what would they do every day? Maybe they would walk 10,000 steps, do some form of exercise, and eat nutritious meals. These daily actions become your system. But here's the key. Make your system so simple that you can't fail. Don't try to exercise for an hour every day. Try to do one push-up. Don't try to read for an hour. Try to read one page. Don't try to meditate for 30 minutes. Try to take 3 deep breaths. The goal is consistency, not intensity. Seneca practiced this with his wealth. Instead of setting a goal to give away a certain amount of money, he had a system of daily generosity. He would look for opportunities to help others every single day. This system made him one of history's most generous people, not because he set big goals, but because he had a reliable process. The practical application is to audit your current systems. What are you doing daily that's moving you toward who you want to become? What are you doing daily that's moving you away from who you want to become? Then design simple systems that support your ideal identity. Remember, goals are about the results you want. Systems are about the processes that deliver those results. Focus on the process, and the results will take care of themselves. Number 10. the law of virtue as the only true good. Marcus Aurelius, who had access to unlimited wealth, power, and pleasure, wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." This is the 10th and final Stoic law of discipline. Virtue is the only true good, and everything else is just preferred indifferent. Most people chase external things believing they will bring lasting happiness. They think if they just get the right job, the right partner, the right amount of money, or the right recognition, they'll finally be fulfilled. But the Stoics discovered something revolutionary. No external thing can give you lasting peace because external things are beyond your complete control. The Stoics identified 4 cardinal virtues that are completely within your control: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These aren't just nice ideas, they're practical tools for living. When you focus on developing these virtues instead of accumulating external goods, you become unshakable. Wisdom is the ability to see things as they really are, not as you wish they were or fear they might be. It's the capacity to make good decisions based on truth rather than emotion. When you develop wisdom, you stop being manipulated by your circumstances and start responding to them intelligently. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's taking right action despite fear. It's doing what needs to be done, even when it's scary, uncomfortable, or unpopular. When you develop courage, you stop being paralyzed by uncertainty and start moving forward regardless of obstacles. Justice is treating others fairly and contributing to the common good. It's recognizing that we're all connected and that your well-being is tied to everyone else's well-being. When you develop justice, you stop being selfish and start being useful. Temperance is moderation and self-control. It's the ability to enjoy pleasures without being enslaved by them and to endure hardships without being destroyed by them. When you develop temperance, you stop being a slave to your impulses and start being the master of your choices. Here's what's beautiful about virtue. It's the only thing that can't be taken away from you. Someone can steal your money, but they can't steal your integrity. Someone can damage your reputation, but they can't damage your character. Someone can harm your body, but they can't harm your virtue unless you let them. Epictetus, who lost his physical freedom as a slave, discovered that virtue was the key to inner freedom. He taught, "No one can hurt you without your permission." This isn't about being physically invincible, it's about being morally invincible. When your happiness depends on virtue instead of external circumstances, you become truly free. The practical application is to make virtue your primary goal. Instead of asking, "Will this make me rich?" ask, "Will this make me wise?" Instead of asking, "Will this make me popular?" ask, "Will this make me just?" Instead of asking, "Will this make me comfortable?" ask, "Will this make me courageous?" This doesn't mean you ignore external goals completely. The Stoics weren't against success, wealth, or pleasure. They just understood that these things are preferred indifferents, nice to have but not necessary for a good life. You can pursue them as long as you don't compromise your virtue to get them. The Stoics had a saying, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." This captures the essence of virtue ethics. When someone treats you poorly, the virtuous response isn't to treat them poorly back. It's to remain true to your principles regardless of how others behave. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, loss, and constant challenges, yet he remained committed to virtue. He wrote, "The best way to avenge yourself is to not be like the one who hurt you." He understood that maintaining your virtue in difficult circumstances is the ultimate victory. When you make virtue your primary pursuit, everything else becomes secondary. You stop being anxious about outcomes because you know you can handle whatever comes. You stop being jealous of others because you know you have access to the only thing that truly matters. You stop being afraid of loss because you know the most valuable thing you have can never be taken away. These 10 Stoic laws aren't just ancient philosophy. They're a blueprint for becoming the person you're meant to be. They're tools that have helped ordinary people achieve extraordinary discipline for over 2,000 years. But here's the truth. Knowing these laws isn't enough. You have to live them. The Stoics understood that philosophy without practice is worthless. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." These laws only work if you work them. They only transform you if you let them transform you. They only build discipline if you're willing to be disciplined in applying them. Start with one law that resonates most with you. Maybe it's conquering your mornings. Maybe it's owning your emotions. Maybe it's mastering the present moment. Choose one and commit to practicing it for the next 30 days. Don't try to implement all 10 at once. That's a recipe for overwhelm and failure. Remember, discipline isn't about perfection. It's about progress. You're going to have days when you struggle, when you fail, when you feel like giving up. That's not a sign that you're not cut out for discipline. That's a sign that you're human. The disciplined response to failure isn't self-criticism, it's self-correction. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is the ultimate message of Stoicism. You are more powerful than you realize. You have the ability to choose your responses, shape your character, and design your life. These laws are simply tools to help you access that power. The world needs more disciplined people. It needs people who can stay calm in chaos, who can make hard decisions, who can delay gratification for greater good, who can maintain their principles under pressure. By developing discipline, you're not just improving your own life, you're contributing to a better world. Your future self is counting on the actions you take today. Every moment you choose discipline over impulse, you're building the person you're meant to become. Every time you apply these Stoic laws, you're investing in a version of yourself that can handle whatever life brings. The journey of discipline never ends, but it gets easier. The habits become more natural. The principles become more automatic. The person you're becoming becomes more real with each passing day. If this video has inspired you to start your discipline journey, hit that like button. Share your biggest takeaway in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel for more content that will help you become the best version of yourself. Remember, you are capable of more than you know. You are stronger than you feel. You are more disciplined than you think. These Stoic laws are your proof. I want you to drop this final affirmation in the comments. I am disciplined, I am strong, and I am becoming who I'm meant to be.